I'm going to go over how I attach a knit neckband to a shirt in the round. So the first thing that we're going to do is start off with our neckband, and we're going to go ahead and sew the two ends together with whatever the seam allowance is in your pattern. For this particular shirt, it is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by using my sewing machine to sew a stitch across here. The reason why I don't use my serger is because when we open this up, we want the seam to lie flat. If we have a serger, it'll fold over and it'll cause a lot of bulk. You very well can do that, however I prefer not to. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch my neckband together with my sewing machine. I just use a 2.5 to a 3 length, and that's it. So I'll come back after I do that. Okay, now my stitch is there. So now we're going to start off by pinning our neckband and our shirt. So with sewing a knit neckband, we want to make sure that we are matching quarter points. If you don't match up quarter points, it's a lot harder to stretch it evenly all the way around. So I always start off by doing with the neckband. My seam is always center back. I also like to, depending on the material of the neckband, sometimes it's nice to put some pins all the way around just to hold it in place. Okay, now that our neckband is all pinned around, now I'm going to mark their quarter points. So I do that by pinching the seam and then finding the center front. I'm going to put a pin in it. And then we're going to match up that pin to that seam line to find the other quarter points. So we found the halfway, and now we're going to find the quarter. Put a pin there, and a pin on the other side. Okay, now that you have those 4 marked, we will put that aside. So on our bodice, typically, well, you're gonna have shoulder seams, but typically the shoulder seams are not a quarter point, and that's what a lot of people, beginners, sometimes might make that mistake, assuming that that's a quarter point. But you can clearly see here, if I pinch my seams, this front scoops a lot. Sometimes on a shirt they may be the quarter points, but on this particular one, that's clearly not going to be the quarter. So what I start off with is finding the back by matching up our shoulder seams together. And then putting a pin here on this mark for the center back. And then we'll do the same thing to find the center front. Now to find the quarters, we'll match these two up just how we did the neckband. But since there is a bit of a curve, you can get a little tricky. You kind of want to let the weight of the shirt to help you get that that point. That way you're not stretching it and getting it a little bit off. So that will give us that quarter. Then do the same thing on this side, matching those up. Okay, now that we have that matched up, then we'll start matching up our pins together. I always like to start off in the back. That way I make sure that my seam on my neckband starts in the back. That's something that some people do, is accidentally sew the neckband on backwards. So, and the easy way you figure that out is grabbing the shoulders, and typically your back is going to be higher up. So we're going to start by pinning there. Oh, and a quick tidbit is if your neckband or if your fabric is directional, for a neckband, when you're looking at it, you want your print to be right side up. That way when you flip it over, it'll still be right side up. So if you are looking at your neckband when you're pinning it right side together, if it is upside down, your neckband is going to end up, the print is going to end up being upside down. But since this is floral and this is non-directional, it really doesn't matter. So I'm not going to worry about it. So now that we have all of our quarter points marked and pinned, now we are going to evenly stretch the shirt to match the neckband. That's also why I like having pins around the neckband, because it's easy to quickly pin them on. It doesn't really matter where you start, but I like to put pressure on one side and stretch it. And so, but you can do it however way is easier for you. You just want to make sure you're pinning evenly between those points. Okay, it's actually easier to sit down for this because I like to use my leg. Okay. Okay, when sewing a neckband or any type of cuffs, I like to sew with my shirt inside out. My sleeves aren't attached on this particular one, but I'm still going to turn it inside out. It makes it a lot easier. And I start with that seam. You want to make sure that it's pulled taut so you don't get any puckerings. And I start before the seam. That way, once I come back around over it, then I'm going to go over the seam again to help kind of stabilize it. And again, this particular one is a 3/8 seam allowance. So my 3/8 seam allowance is right up against this mark right here on my machine. 1/2 inch is about right here. So you always want to have a little mark that you know where to look for your particular machine for your seam allowance. So I'm going to start off by starting. So I'm going to start sewing, and then I'm going to make sure my fabric is lined up against here when I go. And again, keep it taut the whole time. But you don't want to overly stretch your neckband, but you want your shirt, you don't want your shirt to be stretched. You want your neckband to just stretch enough to fit the shirt. Okay, so now we're coming back to the end. So you can see that on my stitches here, I kind of curve down. So we want to continue keeping this fabric all the way to about here is when I started cutting. And that's going to stay lined up against my my little mark where my 3/8 seam allowance is. Then once I finish cutting this off, then the rest of this should be on the left side of my knife, where you don't want to cut any of these stitches. That way you'll just be you'll be sewing over it, but you don't want to cut. That way you keep all your stitches intact. And another thing that sometimes is tricky is here is if you sew on and this spot right here, if this is not straight with if your fabric isn't all straight here, you can get a pucker here. So sometimes if that doesn't come out very well, I'll seam rep a few of these out. That way I can pull it taut and make sure that this is all straight. And so we'll see, now you can see that I'm not going to be cutting any more off. So I'm just going to help feed my fabric through, but make sure it does not get cut by the knife. You lift up your needle all the way, lift up your pressure foot, take it out a tad, and then run some stitches. And then now I have it nice doubled up there, so it's a nice sturdier sturdier stitch right where those seams are. So you can either be done with your neckband as is, or you can top stitch or cover stitch. My cover stitch is not the right color thread, so I'm not going to do that right now, but I'll go over that on a different video. But at least here, let me turn this right side out. You can see we have a nice beautiful neckband. There's no weird puckers. It's all nice and even. And so that happens when you do make sure you do your quarter points and evenly stretch the neckband to fit your shirt. And so that's how I do my neckbands in the round. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. But yeah, I hope that is helpful. Stay tuned for more videos in the future. Thank you.